Militarization of the police, it became a national issue that after the riots in Ferguson, Missouri. Now, we've spoken about that quite a bit on this program, as suburban departments in our area, not just nationally, have military equipment like armored vehicles and heavy weaponry. Now, a short time ago, I spoke with Scott Christopherson. He is the co-director of a documentary that deals with that issue and more. It is called Peace Officer. You know, the genesis of this film, almost as interesting as the film itself. Give an idea, you had a subject matter and a really interesting person with a fascinating narrative. We're talking about Dub Lawrence. The first guy, as I understand it, who started the first SWAT outfit when he was a police chief, as well as also, I guess, land commissioner in Utah in 1975, and then bookended 33 years later by a tragic incident to a family member in 2008. Talk about, I guess, first Dub.
Yeah, so I actually kind of coincidentally met Dub at a softball game in 2012. And Dub kind of approached me. He knew I was a documentary film professor, and he asked me to teach him how to edit. And then he took me back to his airplane hangar, and he was, of course, wearing his septic tank outfit. He fixes septic tanks for a living now, since he left law enforcement. And when I was at his airplane hangar, he showed me this 2-hour-long edit of his son-in-law's shooting death at the hands of the SWAT team that he founded, like you said, 30 years earlier. And I was really fascinated by Dub, by what he had created. It was a very analytical piece. It wasn't really a compelling story, but it was interesting. And I thought, this is a really fascinating, obsessive character, someone who essentially fixes septic tanks by day and then solves crimes by night. And all of his free time is poured into this, and he had been spending 4 years of his life figuring out what went wrong in the SWAT standoff with his son-in-law.
And to that end, what was born out of it wasn't just that I guess, recollection or reinvestigation of that incident, but also the idea of how pervasive the militarization of the police has gone, not just obviously in this part of Utah, but on a national level. Now, the film itself, when you guys began work on it and put the thing together, this was pre-Ferguson, Missouri, right?
Right. So we started this in the summer of 2012. I mean, we didn't even really know what the militarization of police was at that time. And we, you know, as Dub became interested in more cases that had some similarities to his son-in-law's case, and we decided to follow Dub as he explored and analyzed these other cases. And then when we were nearing finishing post-production, Ferguson happened, and we realized that kind of our story that happens in Utah really was kind of a microcosm for what was happening on the national level.
There's one clip I'd like to share with our audience. This was of a drug sting that happened, and the video people are about to see was captured by a helmet camera from one of the police officers involved in a raid. Let me just play the clip.
Police officers are receiving military weapons and equipment. When you dress them up and you give them that mindset, it's not a surprise that they start acting in a militaristic way.
But when the police make a mistake and shoot someone who isn't really a threat, they're always forgiven because it's the volatility of the situation. People on the receiving end of these raids aren't given that consideration.
How much of a national issue is this? I know you focus on one pocket of the country, but I'm sure in investigating it, you found this, you know, coast to coast.
As we began to explore and go beyond just the cases that Dub had investigated in Utah, and as we've toured with the film even, you know, more and more we've realized that this is a huge national issue. And I think the militarization of police isn't necessarily just equipment. I mean, that's certainly a big part of it, you know, surplus military equipment handed down to local police, but it's also a cultural issue, an issue where there's this mindset that maybe some police take where it's us versus them.
In some of the discussions that you'll have with the audience after the film, has the subject of race come up? Because obviously in Utah it's more than 90% white, and in the scenes that we see in the film, race isn't an element, but a lot of people say it's a significant contributing factor to this discussion.
without fail, race comes up almost every single screening, and it should. I think the reality is that these issues have dramatically affected communities of color, and I think that's something that deserves its own documentary series, frankly. It's something that's very important. And I think for our film, we had access to dub, and it just so happens that dub followed cases where the people were white.
And I'm curious, what's been the reaction of law enforcement, Scott?
Most law enforcement that have seen the film and talked to me in person have really liked it, have felt like, whether they're in law enforcement or out of law enforcement, they felt like they were represented well. So really, a lot of police officers all over the place are supporting it. And I think that's because Dub himself, our main character, is a former police officer. He's someone who founded a SWAT team. So he's kind of like this perfect voice.
To find showtimes of the film in your area, please visit peaceofficerfilm.com/showtimes. When we come back, we'll have some Valley headlines, so please stay with us.